Okay.
Go ahead, Tim.
All right. So thanks and welcome to our third installment of our governance practices with ShareMark. Tim and Dave are with you. I'll remind the group that the reason that we're collaborating with our partners and clients on this is that the world is changing fast, and it's changing, at a breakneck speed. And our path to the digital world is going to leave winners and losers and create gaps. And so we want to ensure that our clients, partners, and friends are on that winning side, and that there's a governance path for them to get to their digital workspace and, more importantly, their digital workplace. And we do that by these seminars. It's just one area, so be sure to check out our blogs and our ShareMark website with additional information. But I'll remind everyone that we talked about really the core questions in our first look at this. And then we followed that on last week with looking at access and provisioning and things to think about there. But then to continue on with all of these corporate decisions, today we're going to enhance and talk even a little bit more about enterprise decisions. And with that, Dave, I guess I'd like to pass it on to you because Dave will have the meat and potatoes here. So, you know, if anyone has questions, dig in. But otherwise, Dave, we'll pass the baton to you and we can begin talking a little bit more about enterprise decision making.
You bet. Well, thank you, Tim. I appreciate the opportunity, and I absolutely agree with you that, there will be times here when we'll have open it up for discussion, and we'll just kind of take it through where we are in our topics for today. We're going to definitely be talking about some addition enterprise decisions. What are the core team's responsibilities? We know that the key for our success is having the right conversations with the right people at the right time, and opening the doors for these folks to be able to do this. And in this discussion, in this webinar, we're opening up multiple questions, and we're looking for uh, ideas and concepts of what decisions need to be made, as well as what policies and procedures already exist within the organization that need to be brought to the table and applied or referenced within our governance plan. Again, our objective is overall is to produce that governance plan at the end so that we have a living document that we can work with, and we can continue to set the guardrails and the boundaries that we want to be able to deploy Office 365 and the multitude of tools that it brings to the table for us, and especially around our digital workspace and how we get to operate within that digital space. Let's talk. We'll be talking a little bit about roles and responsibilities today. We'll be talking about definitely communicating with our human resources and the responsibilities and considerations that they need to look at, and what are some of the legal compliance issues that we need to work with. So with that, we'll just go ahead and go forward. If anyone has any questions or concerns, let's address those right off the bat. And if you have any anticipated things you'd like us to make sure that we address during this
Yeah, Dave,
conversation.
I especially want to make sure we talk about the importance of involving the business on this. And you mentioned HR as kind of that business function, but boy, as external forces press on us more and more with GDPR and the likes, we want to make sure that everybody knows what's going on and how the teams can be empowered to distribute the power of gathering that type of information. But we're going to want to make sure that we express, and I know you will, but throughout this, the involvement of how important the business involvement is in this. So with that, Dave, please continue.
You bet. And we want to talk a little bit about branding. Branding does not just mean our logo, or does not mean just how we operate. It's participating in the experience for the employee experience, the end user experience, and what is the overall adoption of usage, and how we modify that. And part of that is also the information architecture. And as we talk about this, please keep in the back of your mind our objective with information architecture is always improving the findability, the ability to find search material that is relevant and appropriate for our search. There's many security policies that need to be in place, and those kind of questions need to be brought out and brought forward as we talk about it. And as we talk about branding and enterprise functionality, we want to talk about, are there style guides for certain websites? Be it whatever tool it is, are there certain things that we need to make sure that colorization, are there certain logos? Can we brand it for each individual department or division? Or maybe we're looking at a global environment where we want to make sure that everything is a specific color, brand, and logo for that. We want to make sure that there is um, permissions that can change for different themes within, for example, in SharePoint's team sites, maybe even within Teams itself. We want to make sure that we appropriately apply the right look and feel in that. One of the biggest things that we run into, and oftentimes as we progress through the journey of even like SharePoint or through Yammer or through Skype for Business, there is a very powerful tool called SharePoint Designer that will apply across the paths. And that tool is going to be permitted, and what's it going to be used for? And there are many different ways to do that. Even things like InfoPath, which we know is retiring in 2020, or now Forms is now something that's part of the Office 365. Are they permitted to be used? When, where, how? What are the responsibilities of that use? Is it going to be a training opportunity for each business unit to have somebody who attends a Forms training seminar for half a day? There are things that need to be done. There are many, as we know, third-party tools and apps that are permitted within the Office 365 environment. What are we going to restrict? What are we going to say, yes, you can have that, or no, that's something that we haven't quite figured out how to make it work, and we don't want to get into a stoppage in anything. Again, we're talking about Office 365 and the applications that we'll be using in our digital workplace and performing within our digital workspace. Our tier one applications, things that we use on a daily basis that affect how we do business and how business is done. So we need to make sure that we put the empowerment and the restrictions in the right locations. Who's responsible for managing the navigational architecture? Are we going to go ahead and start everyone out in Teams? Are we going to have an intranet? Are we going to start out each individual global division at their own community site? These are decisions that we need to make. We need to talk about navigation. We need to understand that the most important things, as with any web design, should always be in the upper left-hand corner but when you get to the populations in Eurasia, many times it's reading right to left. So you have to know where those navigational elements are and how they apply to your geolocation. And it's very important that you talk about that part of it. What are the nodes? Nodes meaning what are the components of your site? Everybody starts on Teams. Is everyone going to have the same look and feel? Are they going to be able to create their own chat or meetings? Is it all going to come out of Outlook and Exchange? Who knows? Those are discussions that need to be talked about. You need to be able to evaluate the effectiveness of the navigational architecture. What are the KPIs that are involved? Not only as are people using it, but are they adopting it as part of their day-to-day operations within their workspace? This is something that needs to be modified. And Office 365 gives us an excellent dashboard to let us know how many users are doing what and how they're doing it. So there's tremendous tools in the background that allow us to do that. How are we are we going to use like and dislikes, hashtags, @sign? How are we improving our look and feel of our navigation? And so these are questions. I don't know if you know or not, but if you like something on a particular document that's contained within SharePoint, it will actually move it up in the search relevance. So when something is searched for, the more likes that it has, the higher it will move within the search content report that comes back when you're looking for something. So those things need to be decided. How are we going to promote the product tool landing pages? How are we going to make sure that people are finding the right information at the right time on the right device? What does the layout look like? What are the landing pages? What's the user experience? And most importantly, what's the employee experience like? Drives adoption. We want to make sure that we're listening every day, if possible, to our business users, our employees, and how they're using that. If something isn't working right for them, we want to go back. In addition to that, we can't be doing one-off custom development at the drop of a hat. We need to make sure that we have specific templates for product owners, solution analysts can leverage when putting up a new engagement. Maybe it's Yammer for a particular group. They want a particular look and feel for it. We want to make sure that there are templates available for reuse. We don't want to be redesigning it, and we certainly don't want to be putting that responsibility back into the IT bottleneck that oftentimes will happen. We want to make sure we use templates as much as possible. We know it's not always possible. Can product owners make changes? What do they have access to? What can they do? Now, this is dealing with product owners who are trained, potentially certified in the use of the product that they own, and they have accountability and responsibility for the deployment of that product. They may not know all the configurations capable, but they should be able to talk fluently in regards to their particular product, be it Delve, be it Project Online, be it Planner, be it SharePoint, be it Skype for Business, be Yammer, Teams. There should be product owners for each of those areas, so they know a depth of knowledge about that as they go forward. Are there certain kinds of guidelines that need to be expected? We need to know where things are at. We need to work with our marketing departments to make sure that we're on the right rail, that things are in the right place, that people are not trying to hunt and find information on a page without not knowing where it's at. It should be consistent. How is training going to be allowed? What are the best practices that communicated to users? If we're not out telling in SharePoint, if we're not out telling our site collections administrators what are the most common best practices that we're using, they're going to invent them themselves, and we don't want that to happen. Again, it becomes a complicated employee experience at that point, and your support desk is going to take an inordinate amount of calls because they can't find something. Well, here it is over on the right side. It should have been on the left. Those kind of web parts that need to be consistently put together. And then who's going to take care of that? Who's going to be trained and know how to go in and give them permission to have access to make those changes? Any questions?
Dave, you've sure given me a lot to think about. And I want to just ask this question because we'll answer it later, but just to keep in everybody's mind that we talk a lot about this responsibility, and with that this great responsibility with this great authority comes great responsibility. We got to think about who these folks are that own this and that can wield that power, but need to get control over it. Who is ultimately responsible for this? And I know that you rattled off a number of applications that are in O365, and I don't want anybody to worry about that. Dave had mentioned Yammer and Teams and a number of things. All that information is available on our website and also via our partner Microsoft, and I don't want you to worry about that. The takeaway here is that there is a great number of tools, and with that comes a great responsibility. So as you continue, Dave, be sure to think about, and I know I have the question in my mind, where's the buck stop? Who are the people that are accountable and responsible, and how can ShareMark help folks using this governance plan identify these people and empower them? So that was more a statement and then a question, but with that, please continue.
That was a great segue, Ed. In fact, in part 4 of our conversation around enterprise policy questions, we identify some of the roles and their responsibilities that come along with the use of Office 365. It not only changes the way people work, but it also changes their responsibilities in their daily operations. It leads right to some additional performance indicators that can be used for expanding career as well as individual performance issues. So those are things that we'll talk about in part 4, but that definitely, Tim, was a great segue for that opportunity to talk a little bit about that. Let's continue on. Go ahead, Tim.
Sorry, Dave, just the takeaway there is that Office 365 is very powerful. Folks I find aren't using half of the capabilities, and with that there's just tremendous opportunity. So well said, Dave. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Well, let's move on. In content organization, one of the things that we need to look at again is our goal in dealing with content and records management and file management across all of the different tools that we're looking at is what are the types of content that we're dealing with? What privacy levels do we need to have in place? What is being driven from the enterprise level? Are we looking at tier one confidentiality content types? Are we looking at maps, videos, images, blogs, wikis? What are the different things that we work towards, and what are the retention codes around some of that? And we can build that into our tool so that when we again come back to our ultimate content organization KPI is findability. Are we able to find, and is it relevant to what we're looking for? One of the most important things that across all of Office 365 is metadata. Metadata is additional terms that are added into Office 365 to help you categorize and to identify and to tag certain things. And it's handled through the term store within Office 365, and it applies across multiple areas. Yammer has its own feeds as well, and Skype for Business, of course, is something that we need to talk about as well as far as the content, the conversations, if we're allowing for files to be shared and exchanged on our internal Skype for Business, then that's something we need to look at. What are the supplemental terms that we need to add to that kind of content? So again, we can find it and we can use it within our capability. In the overall metadata architecture, how are we going to handle folksonomy, taxonomy? How are we working with our multiple languages? We know if we're an international organization and we're dealing with businesses across the world, we need to be prepared. And we know that Microsoft is doing an excellent job in helping us with that, and so are other tools as well. And I know that there's about 165 different language packages that are currently available, and with that comes all the metadata interpretations and things that we've got. It's getting better and better all the time. One of the other parts, if we're in a very specific industry, say that we're in chemical with like DuPont Dow, we find that there are very technical terms that are used, and how do we access all those terms so that we don't have to reinvent them? And there are companies like Wand and other companies out there that provide us all of that taxonomy so we can import it right into the term store, and we can help that to handle our content types and be able to find that information going forward. Even that, we may be using terms that are not readily available in the industry. We may be able to add them as well. And so who's going to handle that? Who's going to be the data steward for a department that's going to say, this is how we handle the data and this is how we're going to use it?
Dave, how appropriate. Back to organic chemistry days. Boy, nomenclature was half the battle. I remember, 2,4,7,8 dinitrobenzene. I mean, holy moly, it gets complicated. So that's a great great tool again. With great responsibility, great power comes great responsibility. It's just these tools are getting better and better every day. Thank
You bet. And again, somebody's got to be accountable and responsible for that information. Have the ability to access that information and add that information is very, very important. And then identifying what the most important prioritization around that data will be. One of the biggest things is how are we pushing this out? How is this information being used? How is it going to be readily available so that we can ensure that the critical content is created and maintained, and we know that we have data that is enterprise level, but we also know that we have divisional and departmental data that needs to be applied in certain areas. One of the most powerful tools used within back to SharePoint is a search scope. And a search scope really gives you the opportunity to filter and redefine your search area, because you can focus on a specific division, department, or a particular topic area. And so these kind of decisions need to be made. Are we going to use search scopes? Are we going to use content managers to help us deal with that? Are we going to allow for news feeds? Are we going to allow the social content to be searched on? Are we going to allow Yammer to have a search capability for conversations that did go on and that may have relevance to what we do. When someone has, for example, in Yammer, they have a town hall, and a vice president will get up and give a talk on Yammer, and the conversations and questions that come back. Well, how is all of that searchable? What does that content look like? And what are the retention policies based around some of that content? Very important that we know and understand that it's not just documents and files and the records that we create. It really and truly is our additional tools that are generating a tremendous amount of structured and unstructured data. Who owns these documents? Who's the contributor? What department? Um, does it depend upon, is it an enterprise level site? Is it a community site? Is it a publishing site? Is it a team site? What type of information is being collected, and what is the retention policies on it? Again, how long do we keep it? Where do we keep it? When do we move it to the record center for disposition and disposal? These are things that we need to talk about. Are we archiving documents? Are we keeping versions of documents? Are we moving records off at 7 years off into the record center and then keeping that audit trail alive so that at some point, if we do get audited through SOX, then we have the capability to go out and find that. How are rules manually enforced? Can we actually go out in Yammer, pull that data out of the Microsoft Cloud, and be able then to hold that? And the answer is yes, but how do we do that? And who's responsible for it? And then again, it oftentimes will fall right back to IT because they're the ones with the direct contacts. And sometimes that's a bottleneck for the business to get that information when it's relevant. How are we going to deal with e-discovery and e-holds on email or data that needs to go forward? So there's a lot of things to think about, as we talk about through this a little bit. Any questions before I move on to the next topic with OneDrive for Business?
No, Dave, great so far.
Okay.
Can't wait for next week talking about some of those decisions. So thank you so much. Keep going.
Absolutely. Well, one of the next areas that we need to look at beyond, one of the tools within the Office 365 suite of tools and as we enable these tools for our employees and for our use is OneDrive for Business. We need to make a decision of when and where and how information is going to be stored. What information will be stored up on OneDrive for Business on each individual personal capability, and then what will be stored in SharePoint, or what kind of the conversations and files will be stored in Yammer, what's going to be stored in Teams, which uses SharePoint, or Microsoft Outlook groups, or what kind of information will be stored and attached in Planner. There's many different things that we need to consider, and OneDrive for Business is one of the most powerful ways to do that. And most companies today are replacing their network shared folders for each individual, which is automatically stored instead of local, is stored up to the OneDrive for Business. And this is a common practice that's going on. But the things that we need to guide and provide guidance on and set the rules is what type of information will be stored up on OneDrive for Business. Oftentimes companies will just say, hey, here's your OneDrive for Business, go use it. And folks are using it for their personal storage of family photos or picnics or whatever they want to put up there. What we want to make sure is that it is a corporate environment. It is considered to be tier 1 again because there's content that is corporate policies that need to be applied to it. We need to make sure that what types of document is going to be stored there. We know when and where documents will be shared and how will they be shared. Internal, external. Can I share it back and forth and work on it? Because you can collaborate. If you put a document up in OneDrive for Business, you can collaborate in real time with up to 25. I think I've had 30 people working on one document and editing it and modifying it at one time, which improves your productivity and your efficiency. But we need to make sure that's enabled. And if you put it out in SharePoint, you're dealing with checking in, checking out. You have some more restrictions on that, but it may be more that those are your corporate files and those are your corporate documents that get stored in SharePoint. Here again is a real quick important consideration when we look at the content types. I don't want to be storing very large data files in there because it starts to eat up my storage. If I put it out in SharePoint, I'm even more limited. SharePoint for a tenant will come with 1 terabyte of automatic storage across the tenant, and then 500 megabytes, not gigabytes, megabytes for each individual license that is provided. If you look at what OneDrive for Business has, we are almost unlimited at this point. I know that some of the consideration in the licensing will come down to 25 gigabytes per individual user. So Microsoft is setting us up to use OneDrive for Business more than that. But you have to realize that there is structured and unstructured data that is going to be stored in both locations. And how do we share that? How do we sync those documents? You can sync your OneDrive for Business with your SharePoint library. You can't really do that with Yammer or other things. But the great thing about OneDrive for Business being in the Office 365 suite is that Delve does an excellent job in tracking down and searching for that information. So your OneDrive for Business is still searchable, and our findability is there. We can turn on some guardrails and some boundaries, but folks need to understand that private data may or may not fall within the boundaries of the policies that we put together in our governance plan for the use of OneDrive for Business. So be very aware. We need to work with that. Now, the last component of OneDrive for Business is the use of long-term storage. We don't want to be putting stuff for long-term. You may have certain policies and guidance around how long do we keep something in OneDrive for Business, because it will fill up, and they generally fill up fairly quickly. So those policies need to be thought about, and they need to have some discussion around that. So let's talk a little bit more about enterprise operational decisions here in just a couple of minutes. Any questions or concerns or anything that I didn't clarify for you?
No, nothing that I can't think of, Dave.
Okay, very good. Appreciate that. Let's move on to enterprise operational decisions. Let's talk about the O365 tool or the apps within Office 365. What type is going to be available? How often are we upgrading? We know that SharePoint 2019 is now going to be available here sometime this coming summer, and it's a major upgrade to Office 365. There will be some new things included. You know, we all thought SharePoint was dead. Not by even the slightest point. They're improving their enterprise content records management capability. The e-discovery capability has been improved, and so has the e-records. That we'll be able to use the record center and be able to use that at a greater level. How do we make those things available? What and how is the disposition and disposal of documents going to be handled? And that includes not only our capability for discovery in disaster recovery or in our backups. You know, one of the things that we need to consider, and it is very possible, that we can back up a lot of the material that we have in the cloud. We know Microsoft is doing it for us, but to retrieve that data sometimes can take up to 3 days. It can take up to 6 weeks to get a full backup restored, and we need to have considerations in place to make that happen. What is our SLAs? What are our SLOs? What are our SLIs around expectations for response time? It all is a lot dependent on our connectivity. So we need to fall back and understand that if many of the issues do not reside within the data centers at Microsoft, they reside in our last mile for our connectivity, and we need to be aware of that and take that responsibility on to know that we have good connectivity and know where things are at. What is our internal network infrastructure? You know, one of the big retailer and manufacturing companies recently worked with found out that their network was nowhere near being ready to handle Office 365 and the additional bandwidth and the additional load that it was going to require in order to have a successful implementation of Office 365. So the tool itself puts a load on that IT backbone, and we need to be very cognizant before we turn it on sometimes that we've done our due diligence to be able to know that, yeah, we moved our network and our firewalls from TCP to UDP, and that we have configured those firewalls to allow for, even down to port 443 is the correct one for Skype for Business versus another one. So, a lot of considerations, a lot of things that we need to look at going forward. One of the other big operational things that we need to look at is how are we going to improve that employee experience? And that includes support. If we're going to allow for custom development, or we're going to allow for use in production environments, we want to be able to support that before we deploy it. We want to know that our people are trained, certified, and have experience using those tools. We don't want to find ourselves 6 weeks down the road and our end users, our user experience is so bad that we have to literally suspend a tool like Skype for Business or something like Yammer, because we can't support it. And IT should be looking at the business to be able to assist and help with that, creating those champions that are out there to support it. One of the biggest things, and I know Tim and I are working on this diligently right now with many of our partners, is migration. Migration is not just a lift and shift of data. When you actually look at migration, how's it going to be supported? What is the change management that's going to occur? What is the awareness of our business community that, oh, guess what? We're moving to Office 365 ecosystem. This is what we've got going. How do you want your data now organized and made? Are you aware that we can do better than what we had before? And if we don't do our due diligence on that, we're really going to hurt our adoption rates. Any questions or concerns?
Yeah, you make such a great point, Dave. With great power comes great responsibility. Again, the options and tools that are available for migration, as Dave mentioned, it's not a lift and shift or a cut and paste. Items can be synchronized, and we're finding so many of our partners here and clients that when they have the opportunity, they have the hood up, as they say. You might as well even repair, fix, and synchronize / minimize, whatever, clean up the data that you have. Again, the power that some of these tools have are staggering and very empowering with the options that they give you. So I can't emphasize that more. Back to you, Dave.
Yeah, well said, Tim. I think that's very important that we can give those considerations. And we really follow, here at ShareMark, we're really working towards the ADCAR process and making sure that our change management is top on our list, that we want to make sure that we have that decision making and that we have the right awareness and we have the right responsibilities assumed as we're going forward. So, we definitely are pro-SI proponents, and we'll love to have an opportunity to talk to you about that and how we apply change management to the implementation of Office 365. But let's continue on with operations and support. One of the main part, IT has done a fantastic job in turning the lights on. They are the enablers. They keep Office 365 running 365 days out of the year, 7 days a week, and 24 hours a day. They're responsible for that internal infrastructure, and if we have a hybrid environment, we're definitely falling on their onus to that. But the content is owned by the business and is responsibility of the business. Keeping the lights on is IT, and we should be really working together in concert to be able to work with that. If we're going to do custom development, the ownership, once that goes into production, falls back into the business. The use of policies around third-party apps falls back to how is it being used. IT can certainly turn the lights on, make sure the app is available, but it is dependent on business usage. And again, I really focus on a lot of the things that we're talking about here are business first, IT second, because IT is our keep the lights on folks, and we want to make sure that we're supporting them and we're helping them as much as we can. And then support to the infrastructure is again dependent. How much do we have on-prem? How much is hybrid? And how much is in the cloud? And that tells you the level of ownership as well as responsibility going forward. Let's talk a little bit about individual user content. We often find that users are not aware of some of the capabilities that they have, and we need to make decisions around not only for awareness, but also for their use. So we're going to start out with user profile. Um, in this conversation, we're really going to talk about HR. HR is a lot responsible for the amount of content. Let me give you an example. Content. Structured, unstructured, we're not really sure where it lies, but let's talk about Yammer. Yammer has a lot of conversations that go on, a lot of content is put up. One of the big pitfalls of Yammer is it's kind of a green field. Folks can create new groups. They can have conversations on all multiples of different kinds of things. What are the out of the box attributes that we need to make sure that we're working on? We need to know how are we going to set the guardrails in Yammer. We don't want somebody out there selling guns and ammo on a garage sale on Yammer when it's really not our company policy to allow for that to go on. We don't want somebody posting their personal blogs or creating wiki pages for personal content. We want to make sure that we set that user profile and it's guided by HR for our corporate communications, are definitely partners, and really drive forward with our user profile of how it's going to be used. What are the attributes that we need to be plugging into it? Are there custom attributes? Meaning, again, we're back to scope and search, and we're back to filtering. What are the ways for us to be able to handle structured and non-structured content at the user level? And I know, Tim, you and I were talking about granularity of how do we manage that? How do we enforce that? How do we empower our business units to be able to know how those attributes go forward? And we can do that at a granular level, at the document level, through the document properties, and we can enforce that before something can even be saved, so that it improves our collection of profile attributes for that. And we're going to talk
And there's two steps to that, Dave. It's awareness first of all, that the tools are there and that they can do that, and then training, which we can provide as well. But most of it is awareness. There's so much power within the Office 365 suite that we find many of our clients have this. They're paying for it. Might as well use it and exploit it and get your return on it. And those are important points. So thanks for that insight, Dave.
And perfect segue to the fact that not knowing what's available within the tools is difficult to actually execute on that. And so you need to bring in a third party to be able to show you what it is, how it's used, what other companies have done with that. And that's what we do really well. So we want to definitely bring that to the table for you. One of the things I want to go in and talk a little bit about, it's very important because now we're talking about PII data, we're talking about HIPAA rules, we're talking about credit card transaction processing, and we want to look at the user profile and how that user profile is put out there. Now, specifically what I'm meaning is Yammer has the ability, if you want to start a bicycle riding club, you could create a Yammer site or channel for that. You create one in Teams as well. And discuss that and maybe post your times of when you're going to have a competition, or your daily Saturday rides will be there. Maybe you put some pictures up about those daily Saturday rides. Or, for example, you might have people involved in doing other things. So let's talk a little bit about one of the constraints that we run is the tools are beginning to work together, and that's why Microsoft is pushing us towards Teams. Teams gives us some of that interface. But let's talk about the user profile, because this becomes very important. Is how much information are we asking our individuals to put up in the about me? Maybe I'm an avid mountain climber, and I'm very interested in doing that, so I put that in the about me. They may also have information about professional and personal information. I might have, what are my certifications? What are my interests? What are my career goals? How much information do we really want to be expanding on that? Maybe a lot. It depends upon what the HR is telling us that we have the ability to put up there. The more that we put up in that, the faster. If somebody is searching for the bike club and wants to know who else is involved in the bike club, you can use the search capability within Teams or SharePoint or Yammer to find out, who's telling me that they're interested in riding bikes. It might be something that's very valuable. The next big consideration is picture. I've seen folks put up odds and ends. from a cartoon character violating some copyright issues sometimes. We want to make sure people are very aware of the picture that they put up. We want to be able to have a good corporate profile that tells what type of picture. And oftentimes that can be driven right out of the security department in the picture for their badge. It should be. Why is that important? What's in it for me is that if I'm looking for somebody that I want to be part of a United benefits package, I want to know who should I go looking for. And oftentimes you may see the name, and there's nothing more than I hate than go around to every single little area or cube within an organization looking for a name. I want to find a picture of somebody, and a picture can be very helpful in, again, findability, and that's part of that. The ask me about, what are the topics that people can ask me about? Maybe I just completed my Office 2016 certification. People can ask me about. I'm now a champion. I can help you with figuring out the formulas within Excel, or maybe I want to be asked about, how to put that together. And so we need to set the guidelines and considerations around what are the terms. We can again use hashtags. We can use the @ sign for findability. And people may not be aware that it's amazing what our social collaboration and content areas need to be put together. We can use for @ signs, and nobody knew that. And why not use it? Why not give that consideration? Go ahead, Tim.
So, Dave, some of the large corporations that I've worked at have had even Microsoft SharePoint user groups where they met and just collaborated and asked questions of each other, and we've assisted them on that. So these things are great. And then, folks, if you're wondering what Yammer and Teams and some of these things are, we're not being purposely vague. We're just trying to expand on many of the things that come along with O365 that folks can collaborate on and exploit. Yammer's just think kind of like Facebook for the business, but all that information's on our website as well, and hopefully those are little teasers for you. But we're talking about a lot of items that come along, and we just wanted to make sure that you understand. That's part of our goal here, is to show you all the things that come with Office 365 that can be used to really empower these whole teams and enterprise. So with that, Dave, please carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. Things that we need to have under consideration that need to be defined within our governance plan is are we going to put a company mobile phone, a personal mobile phone? Is it going to be a privacy issue associated with mobile phones that allows you to look it up? Already some of that is in Active Directory. When you set up a profile in Active Directory for a particular information, that's going to be flown down. But HR needs to make the decision. Are we going to allow text messages across private phones or just company phones? Is there a fax number, home phone? Many people don't want their home phone number put out there, and some people do. It's a privacy issue that needs to be addressed. Where's your office location? Is it in Tokyo? Is it in New Delhi? Is it in Frankfurt? This really helps people to understand. The next one is time zone. Oftentimes we forget that London is 6 hours ahead of us, and we're talking at someone and scheduling a meeting. We don't know their time zone, so that's a very important aspect to that individual that will be brought out when we schedule a meeting. This is where it comes from. Who are their assistants? Who is their delegated assistant, if they have one, or who's been that part of it? You can complete all of this information. Past projects that you've been involved in. What are your skills? Are you good at public speaking? Have you had past experience with formulas in Microsoft Excel? Maybe you've had past experience with designing websites. These are things that are very considerate, and they're also searchable. Again, privacy is very important. Birthdays. Maybe your company is a firm believer in having a birthday lunch. Maybe you want that put out there. It's very optional, but it is information that you need to see that. One of the most important concepts is over there in sample guidance. When people say they're following someone and they can click on, I'm going to follow that person, they're going to be able to get a news feed on their birthday. There's going to be information brought out and put forward on that. Little nuances can really make the user experience and the employee experience so much better than just not looking at all those extra things that go forward. What are your interests? Again, like I said, what are the things that I'm interested in? Bicycling, mountain climbing. Maybe I'm in a quilting club. Maybe I'm in a knitting club. Maybe I have past military experience. I want to be able to connect with other folks that are also within the company. Maybe I want to share some of that personal or business related activities. Again, it's an HR function, and that's why HR needs to be so involved in here.
Right.
Go ahead, Tim.
Go Dave, just that, as the world is changing and it's changing quick, the world's also shrinking. I don't want to discount that time zone and where's your office feature, because I know for a fact the last program that I was working on, I had team in New York, London, and Sydney. I mean, my goodness, you got to keep track of that. And with that great power comes great responsibility. Again, can you do all these things with Yammer and the social media and items that we're talking about and all the collaboration tools? The answer is, of course, you can do it. But more importantly, as you're asking, should you do it? We want to help our clients and partners work through that together to come up with some consistent policies so no one's surprised when the knitting club site shows up in your collaborative software. So thanks again, Dave, for expanding on that.
Well, and the real connection here is again being that social collaboration across the organization improves employee experience, and it really improves the overall culture of the engagement. And what we have found is that when people are mentioned, we put an @ in front of someone's name, they appreciate that. They get an email that says, "Hey, you've been mentioned in Yammer. Here's the conversation," and it quickly can take them there. Yammer really helps. The chat is actually Yammer in Teams, and it does the same thing. So we're using many of the same social tools that you would use in your personal engagements. Here's talking about the #, uh, and how that's used, and talking about keeping track. What does this do? What's in it for you is that your searchability improves. When things are put into a hashtag, it improves the priority, and it moves it up in ranking within the search returns on that. So a list of these terms are not only put into the term store at that time when you put a hashtag in front of it, but it also improves the taxonomy overall. So talking about OneDrive for Business and concluding that, who's going to use it, when's it going to be used, and how is it going to be used? What are the restrictions on the types of content? Again, we talked a little bit about using private data versus company collaboration data. What other business versus team collaboration spaces are we going to use, and how are we going to use, you can sync a document within OneDrive for Business with a SharePoint environment. So every time you change it in your OneDrive, every 15 seconds, it will automatically go over and sync and update the data within SharePoint. There's lots of things that need to be decided. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's not such a good thing. What about the use of blogs? Are you going to allow blogs to be used? Are they going to be internal or external policies on that? Do you want your people blogging? I know of one company here in Minneapolis that requires its employees that are of professional status to blog once a month. If they don't write a blog, it goes on their performance indicator. They want them talking about what they do, how they do it, and how it applies, and what's in it for them. What are the guidelines? Do we need to train people on how to write blogs? You bet. Blogs are a very powerful communication tool, and if we're actually requiring our employees, we need to be able to tell them about what we're doing. So, are we going to be able to use wikis? And we'll talk about that in just a couple of seconds here. Then we move on. That's basically where we're going to stop here today. We'll open it up for any questions, but be aware that, as Tim has said, this is a tier 1 application across the enterprise. No matter what size it is, this is used, with great power, which was what we're given here in the enablement of Office 365, comes great responsibility, accountability. We need to make sure that the right people are involved. What are the roles and responsibilities? And we'll be covering that in our next session, which is dealing around part 4 and talking a little bit more about enterprise social. We'll talk more about what are the roles and responsibilities within our engagement. So at that point, Tim, I'll turn it back to you to put closure on this and answer any questions you might have.
You did my job for me, foreshadowing what's coming next. You know, the takeaway here, and thank you, David, again, as always. The detail that you go into is perfectly appropriate and just right. Um, with that responsibility, great power comes great responsibility. Our job is to collaborate with you to exploit these tools, and we've been there and done that. So if we come at you fast and furious, it's only because we're passionate about this, and the ways to collaborate and then customize Office 365 to your specific needs are just about boundless. I think you can categorically say that, right, Dave? I mean, you can customize it to suit exactly what you're looking for and do this and not do that. And so that's why it is paramount that these questions are addressed up front in a complete governance review, not an incomplete governance review, because as we've discussed with our partners, an incomplete governance review is just as useless, frankly, as not having one at all. So we got to check those boxes, and we've been successful helping our partners and clients to do just that. So appreciate your attendance, and look forward to the next presentation 4, where we get more into the roles and responsibilities. I can't wait to get there, Dave, because I know folks left this presentation thinking, "Oh, this is all well and good, and you're absolutely right. We need this governance, but who's going to do it? Who's going to do it?" And it's how do we make or buy, make or train these folks and get them in place and empower them as well with the appropriate authority to go along with this great responsibility. So thank you again, Dave. Any last comments? Otherwise, we'll say so long until next week. Any final comments, Dave?
No, not at this time. I look forward to the opportunity to speak with folks and answer any questions that they might have. So thank you, Tim. I'll go ahead and stop the recording at this point, and I got something to tell you.